Well, hello, folks, and welcome to the Melhorn Fishing Podcast. Hope you're having a good day, whatever day it is that you happen to be checking out the show. If you're watching this one close to when it's uploaded, it's summertime. It's still hot. It's still just good old summertime, hot weather fishing. I did a podcast recently and was just talking about summer fishing, that we were basically past the spawn and we were into the pretty much kind of uphill trend in the fish bite since the spawn. As some of y'all may or may not know, springtime coming out of winter is when the catfish really start to bite. The fishing really starts to get good. And man, just as summer rolls around and kids are out of school and you're taking some vacation, it's time to go fishing. June gets here and the spawn happens. Things go downhill for a while, about a month. And then around the 1st of July, things start ramping up and getting better and better. And that's kind of where, we've been. It's gotten better and better and better. And, it's summertime fishing, as I described it. And it gets to be somewhat consistent for a while. But there's one thing I want to talk about that is a little, just a little caveat that's thrown in there that can kind of mess things up. And I don't know why exactly it happens, but I'm going to talk about why I think maybe it happened. So, as I've seen from some of the texts from some of you guys, that you're experiencing some tough fishing. And this varies parts of the country, and depends on how you're fishing too. But I've heard that from a lot of people. It's like, oh man, it was good, and then it kind of died. Don't know what's up. Don't know what's different. Going to try a different time of the day. And it's kind of what we've seen here. I'll tell you kind of the backstory based on the guide trips that I've done. If you don't know, I'm a charter captain here right outside of Charlotte. Got a guide business. Go to my website, melhornfishing.com. You can find out all the information on that there. But coming out of June, I really don't run trips in June. I had a few people. It was the only time they could go. It was the end of June. We went, we caught some fish. There were decent days. It's just not what I was used to coming out of April and May, where it was just phenomenal fishing. And, going into that time period, I expect that same thing every year. And I know what's going to happen. And I just kind of, accept it and deal with it. And that's what it is. So, starting in July, started getting a little bit better, started catching some fish. We had some days catching some, decent numbers in the teens. Any day I can get a trip, even if we don't get the bigger fish. If we're catching fish in the teens into the 20s, I'm considering it a good trip, when we're having those above average number catch days, when you get into 14, 15, 20 fish a day, that's good fishing. But what happened last week, started to notice, and I heard this from some other guides out there, a bunch of us here in this area, we talk, share information on what we're seeing, what's going on, was that those mid-sized fish started to disappear again. And it was a lot of channel cats showing up. And, some of them were good fish. There were some blues in the 4, 5, 6 pound range, but that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pound range, which we have a lot of in this reservoir. We just weren't seeing them, just weren't catching them. No, they're there. We smoked them in April and May, but it had slowed down. Smoked them in early July, and it got kind of tough to find these fish. And, we'd poke around, we'd pick up some fish in the teens, a couple of them every trip, but man, it was covering a lot of water. And I and some of the other guys were trying a lot of different stuff, trying some shallow water fishing, shallow anchored up on points, trying some of the deeper stuff that was away from the thermocline. We have a thermocline where we're at, so that was kind of affecting things a little bit. And it's just, it's one of those phases where it's like you're catching some good numbers. The bigger fish are hard to come by. Now, granted, on the majority of the guide trips I do, we are not trying to win a tournament with the fish we catch. We are trying to catch fish. Most people that book a trip with me, I have a few that want to trophy fish, and if so, we'll do that. It's kind of a different approach, but it's a kind of hero or zero. It's let's catch 3 or 4 fish that would be, fish it like we're trying to win a tournament versus catching a large number of fish. And there's a whole different strategy for that. But I say all that to say we're just trying to get on a decent bite of fish. Was typically on our reservoir where I fish, if you are in a decent bite and in an area that is holding biting fish, typically you will pick up some better fish in that area. So, but the thing we're finding is bigger fish were disappeared. And I have a theory on what's going to happen. And this is something you guys can pay attention to in other parts of the country, depending on where you're fishing and what kind of waters you're fishing. But with these reservoirs, it seems like we hit a streak about this time. Sometimes it's a little later. It seems like into August where you'll hit the streak where the medium-sized, better fish become a little bit tougher to catch for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks at the most. And when they start biting again, you start catching them again. They got the mud on them. You've seen me talk about this in videos. They've got mud on them. The fish we've been catching recently, the fish we've been catching up to this point, not a lot of mud on them. They start showing up with mud. There's a lot of theories on what this is, why this happens, what causes it. And I've heard them all. Everything from they're laying in the mud in the summertime because it's cooler to they're just down there dormant and inactive and just sitting there. I've heard some people try to dismiss it. Well, that's just the place on the fish that the mud sticks to. In the wintertime, and that's what I'm going to get to here, is the wintertime is that they say that it's to stay warmer because the mud's warmer than the water around them. So I'll say this phenomenon happens any season of the year. This happens in the wintertime. It happens in the summertime. I've even seen it happen in the spring. And generally, it's somewhat widespread. It seems like there will be just a decline in the bite. It's not a long-term decline. Maybe, like I said, maybe 10 days. And at the end of it, you'll start to catch fish. You'll start to pick off bigger and bigger fish. And you'll start to notice more and more of them have this mud on them. So I wonder, does it happen now because there's been a big feed up on mussels and stuff after the spawn? For whatever reason, these fish, blue catfish especially, feed very heavily on mussels after the spawn. And, it probably takes it seemed like that's a lot harder way to get full. It takes a lot more work and effort than eating one big fish. I don't know. Are they resting, storing up, recuperating? I don't know, but I got a feeling, especially you guys fishing some of the reservoirs, might be struggling with a bite right now. Let me know if you see the same thing happening where you're at. I'd love to get your feedback on this because, I've talked to people around here and, that's kind of the phenomenon you get. Now, the one thing is, it doesn't seem to be something that's like, I've got lakes 10 miles north of here, 40 miles south of here. It's not something that happens across this entire river drainage. It is something that could happen here. It could happen on another lake a week from now, another lake 2 or 3 weeks from now. It's not something that is like region wide. So it's kind of interesting. You can have this going on here and you go up to Lake Norman and the bite's on fire up there. So that's just the interesting part about it. So when this starts to happen in the summertime, that's when I start to go, we may be into that cycle. So I'd love to get your feedback on it. It's something for you guys to keep in mind. I don't know that it really applies too much to people fishing in ponds, little small lakes, that kind of thing. I think this is for bigger bodies of water, but it definitely affects you guys bank fishing too, because, you're fishing for the same fish. And I will say this, sometimes it affects the blue cats more than I see it happening with flatheads and with channel catfish. The channel catfish still seem to feed. It's like it doesn't happen at the same time, if that makes any sense. So it's almost like it's species specific. And again, I don't know what it is with that size, that range of fish. The smaller fish don't seem to be as affected by it. We were catching eater-sized fish without a problem, but it's that mid to bigger sized fish that seem to, be affecting our bite more by it. So I don't know. It could be the way I'm fishing, could be where I'm fishing. I've tried a lot of different options and a lot of different variables during this time. And like I said, within a week or 10 days, it goes back to catching them normal. So I'd love to get your feedback on it. It's something I like to share with you just to keep an eye out for, because sometimes it can get frustrating, especially during a good time. But that's fishing. It's why we keep fishing, and it's why we love chasing these things. So we'll catch you guys out on the water.